Another mysterious monolith has appeared.
A mysterious monolith that...
An alien monolith on the hill. And where did it come from? And a whole bunch of questions.
Visitors are flocking to a new mystery.
A mysterious monolith.
Mysterious monolith has appeared there.
Welcome to this mystery solving video. In this one we will solve the mystery of the monoliths of 2020. So if you don't know, at the end of 2020 and 2021 there was many of these that popped up all over the world. Okay, so what I've done is I've compressed a larger study into a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll go through in a moment. Some of my background research and information, all very interesting stuff. We'll go through all this in a moment. And before we do that, I'll just share with you techniques that engineers use to solve problems, where we define a problem, we gather information, we generate solutions, and then we evaluate solutions and choose the best one. We will not even need to get that far. The monolith code. So here we have 140 confirmed monoliths that I would say are genuine. They appeared over 138 countries. In other words, there's 58 less countries that did not appear. And I'll get to that after we've solved the mystery. And that they all stood for a total sum of 1,000 days. There's a plotted map of where they all are. I did just want to cover fake monoliths. So you can see this one is not a monolith, it's just somebody's thrown out an old fridge. This is a piece of steel resting against a rock. This one here, this guy made it, and you can see it's not 10 feet tall, and also he put underneath a website where you can make donations. I don't know what his idea was, but the domain name was closed within a year. This one here, it looks like an explosion or a bomb has gone off in a local hospital and the kitchen sink landed on the beach. This one here, these guys on YouTube made one, and they could see how difficult it was to actually make one according to the known measurements and size. And then when they tried to deliver it, they realized it doesn't fit in their car. So they had to struggle, and anyway, they managed to accomplish one eventually, but they realized how difficult it was. Now here is a timeline. Now one bar is one monolith, and they started on the 18th of November and they end up on the 28th of May. Some people gave us dimensions. They measured them to about 10 feet. Some said 10.5 feet, 1.5 feet wide. Now I have collected in the first wave 137. And then 3 more in 2024, which will be later on. I believe there's 4 missing. I think the true total is 144 to be exact. I'll explain why in a moment. When we measure the distance between them all, and you have 144 in total, the distance between all the monoliths as they were being plotted around the world, they equal the same distance as the Earth to the Moon, 384,400 kilometers. If you sum up the bearing angles to the first temple of God in Jerusalem, we get an interesting number, 23,000 odd. Now the average at 36 is 172 degrees, an average bearing. I believe the true average bearing at 144 should be 180. Now, let me ask you something. During 2020, what do you think the world needed to do a 180 from? Do you think A, the coronavirus, or B, the price of the latest Nintendo? What do you think? I'll leave that one with you. Now, when we take that total bearing sum and we divide it by 360, we get 64. And it's interesting how there are 64 codons in the DNA strand. Now the number 8 comes up quite a lot in the study. 8 and 8 is 64. And you'll see that many monoliths are sectioned up or divided into 8 parts, or displaying 8. Now here are some measurements which people have given us. We know that some of them are square from the images and some of them are triangular. We know that some are measured to 10.5 and some are 10 feet. Now when you convert to meters, cubits, feet, inches, other units of measure, and you look at the volume, It's interesting how you get exactly 6.66 is their height when it's 10 feet in cubits. We also get the same value, 6.66 cubic cubits in volume when the monolith is 10 feet tall, 1.5 feet wide. Now what I found is that all the one side panel tracked true north. Now if you visited a monolith, you would not be able to tell, because if you pulled out your compass wherever you are on the earth, the compass would point to magnetic north. However, if you use a fixed point like I happen to do with King Solomon's temple, or the first temple in Jerusalem, and if you use that as a fixed point, you can measure the azimuth and look at how tight the tolerance is, 0.01 degrees. So the first example is absolutely bang on. So basically the monoliths were all tracking true north, and if you plot them, you'll find that many of them line up. This map doesn't show because it's projected over a flat two-dimensional map, not a globe. So I have a total of 30 pairs out of all of them, 30 pairs that line up exactly with the North and South Pole. Now with the North Pole would be 0, and with the South Pole 180. Now you can see how close my measurements are. Look at how close. These three of them are absolutely bang on 0. But look at how close all the others are. They're within 1 degree. 1 degree of the location. So that's 30 of them form a bearing parallel to the north and south polar axis of the Earth. Now in 2024 there was 3, and here they are positioned on the Earth. Now if you dropped an anchor down to the center of the Earth from each monolith where they stood, you may say to yourself, okay, in between, what portion of the world did it include, and what portion does it exclude? In other words, what percentage is remaining, what percentage is consumed? You get exactly 66, 34, 15, and 85. And if you measure the distance in kilometers, or miles, or cubits, you get some interesting numbers. Now in cubits, biblical measure, you get 9281. The 9281 verse in the Bible is this one, 1 Kings 7:21. That's where it says, he set up the pillars 20 cubits high. I found that very interesting because 20 cubits is 30 feet. And 30 is the number of pairs we had lined up with true north, God's throne. These verses in the Bible, another one down here, Genesis 31:46, which is 993. The pillars standing outside the city gate as legal witnesses. And there's some others here. The stones as testimony. Now we're going to line up the percentages consumed and remaining. The 66 lines up with brought us out to a place of abundance. So it's about surviving the pandemic. Okay, 34, and he answered me and delivered me. My skin wasted away and he has broken my bones. So it's all to do with surviving the pandemic, healing of fear and disease. 15% lines up with James 1 verse 5, a theme of strength and guidance during trials, wisdom in a trial. And pilgrimage, 85% is the Song of Solomon, 8.5, bringing one up from the death, the theme of emergence from desolation and support and love that revives. Now, if we have a look at a time displacement graph, you will never see one like this. These monoliths were placed over time with a time-day difference that line up. In other words, if you plotted this, look at how these three line up in a line. And then these three in 2024 line up in a line. So it's like there's a big triangle formed at the end. Now, the final three in 2024, you might say, what does not form a perfect line. It actually opens a little triangle. It's about 0.2 degrees on one side and 2 degrees on the other. But that inner angle, this greater angle, is 178 rounded. You could say that 77 mercy plus the 100-fold blessing plus the first fruit. So we've got 111, 26 degrees, and 33 degrees. That's quite incredible, because 111 is a very good number to describe the Holy Spirit. 26 is the Hebrew number for God, Yahweh, and 33 is the age that Jesus was crucified. So there is a theme going here of the Trinity in the end in 2024, and no plague shall come near your tent. Now, I also found that all the monoliths have they're in a range of magnetic declination. Okay, now there's a website you can go on, and you can put in a location and a date, and the website will tell you what the magnetic declination was at that time. Now, it just so happens that all the monoliths were placed in a range of 5 and 14. Okay, 83% of them. 17% has a range between 9 and 15. Yes, this is a maximum and minimum tolerance. Could be between minus 30 and plus 30, wherever you are. So if it was random, you would have this. But it was certainly not random, the way these were placed on the earth. Okay. Now 933, well, is the average. And that's interesting, because in Romans 9:32 speaks of how they stumbled at the stumbling stone. Now 5, the grace of God, and 14, another number that comes up here shortly in the study, we consider it as deliverance. Now, if you measure the distance between the monoliths and the center of the earth, in other words, x0, y0, what is that distance? So we list it all out, and over the 140 monoliths, and we find that none of them make sensible words in Hebrew. Okay? But there is 5 that do make one word, and another 5 that make another word. So there's only 10 out of the whole 140 that I've got that actually make sensible words. And it just so happens that 5 of them are the same, and 5 of them are the same, which is lev and mat, heart and spoon. This is all to do with the theme of God's 5-fold grace and his 5-fold provision. Now, the monoliths ran for 192 days in the first wave. The 2020 wave was 192 days. Now, 192 can be broken down into several different themes. Take Jesus' number 106 and add 86, which would be Jesus and God. You could take 144 and 48, which is the wall and priesthood. So there were some interesting combinations to make up and explain the healing arc across earth and history. Now, if you take this timeline, the plotted positions of all these monoliths, now up here there's about 10 per day. Almost 3 full days there was 10 placed all over the world per day. Can you believe it? Who can pull that off? Not even Donald Trump's great military could pull something off like that. But anyway, we have this timeline and the placement represented on a straight graph, a linear method. But if we turn this now to a radial chart, in other words, we create a radial chart and we plot the position and how many over an arc, look at what we get. Boom. This is the placement of all the monoliths. And you can see that over time, as we turn around, it creates the golden spiral. So just visually seeing that, I then did a mathematical check to see if all the monolith dates line up with the Fibonacci sequence. And they do. Look at this. So many of the dates do. And the few that don't, out of all of them, have a 1 to 3 day tolerance. Isn't that incredible? So what's it to do with? Well, the placement is certainly not random. It follows a sacred pattern of growth and expansion and completion, because it's all about the Fibonacci sequence. It's all about life and growth and time and destiny. All the monoliths, as they were placed around the world, we have a list of where they were placed within a winter solstice, where they were placed within a summer solstice. And I get these two numbers here, 72 and 72, although I said I'm 4 short. Okay. So we have 72 and 72. Why? It's a message of to go out and heal and teach and proclaim peace. This was Jesus' instruction. Understand what this sign from God is. Okay, we need to look at the first part of the year. We're going to bump the whole timeline to the right so we can look earlier on in the year, all the way from January 2020. Now, this was the time when the corona pandemic and the lockdown happened, and the coronavirus ended up taking 3 million people. Okay, if you were healthy, corona would put you in hospital. If you were elderly or sick, corona would put you straight in the grave. You wouldn't even go to the hospital. So what was the biggest news stories other than the coronavirus itself during this year, 2020? What happened? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. On the 28th of May, there was a vaccine announcement. That's a little miracle on its own, because we don't really have the technology to cure viruses. We can cure diseases. Many of modern day diseases can be cured, but certainly not viruses. By formula, which scientists cannot explain or change, happens to take 14 days to become effective. And at the same time, after this date, the 28th of May, we have 19 corona variants pop up all over the world. Boom, 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 boom. Now these variants, they're wonderful to get. Why? Because they do nothing to you. They give you a snotty nose and you take 1 day off work. What bliss. And once you get this new variant, you can't get the original. The original cannot affect you. It cannot attach itself to you. So the variants, because they've spread, they're more contagious, they've drowned out the original coronavirus. Coming back to our timeline, let's explain these numbers. 14. 14 comes up in the Bible as a completion of cleansing. God's covenant meal, the Passover meal, was on the 14th day of the month. We have the 14th Nisan. So it's a divine threshold between death and life. And then the 19 cities assigned to Judah, it's something to do with the fallen, the dead fallen. Now, if we measure the number of days between that date, the 28th of May, the mini miracle, here we have 174 days later, all these monoliths start popping up. 174. And to explain 174 is 144 plus 30. Now 144 is in the book of Revelations, and it speaks of God creating a wall to separate man from disease and death. And the 30 is Jesus has started his ministry. Now exactly 3 days before the 28th of May is the 25th of May. And on this day, boom, we get a crop circle. Now this crop circle is this image of a bird. Look at that. Now, did you know that the dove is the only bird with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 feathers along its wing? When we measure the sizes of these circles, from first view, we get everything that man was doing. People were suffering at this time, shouting, God, save us, have mercy, help us, we are dying, our families are dying in hospital, we're losing our jobs. The world was in chaos. And here comes the dove with the heart 3 days before the vaccine. Now what's interesting is that if you measure the wing length, the head circle, tail tip, and you use different units of measure, as in fingers, inches, hands, feet, meters, cubits, you'll see it all lines up with these chapters and verses in the Bible that speak of disease. Look at this one. He took up our infirmities and bore our disease. Power was coming from him and healing them all. Faith will make the sick person well. Your faith has healed you. Every disease and sickness. Health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Righteous will rise with healing. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. This is the passage where Jesus heals the man who was lame for 38 years, I believe. Do you want to get well? And this one down here, people brought to him all who were ill, and he healed them. Now, if you look at the numerical combinations, like there's 4 around the heart, there's 9 along the wing, there's 1 around the head. If you take these sort of combinations, 1 tail tip, so you got 9, 9 and 4 is 22. We've got feathers in the head, which sums up to 19. We got the heart, which is 4 parts. So some interesting numbers here, and look at what it lines up to via matches in the Bible. Have you seen my glory in the signs? The signs and wonders, signs and wonders. give it to the people to eat. Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? Look at that, very interesting. So, all to do with signs and wonders. And this is a sign from the miracle God performed up in heaven on this very day. Now, what's interesting is that if you take this crop circle and you measure the distance between all the locations that had something to do with the corona vaccine, or even where corona first came from, we got Pfizer in New York, Moderna, we got Biotech, Denmark, I think, Oxford in the UK, in the USA, Serum that's in India and China. We got all these distances just in kilometers, and the Hebrew words that these numbers make is disease, miracle, peace, life, prayer, healing, faith. Do you get the gist of it now? On the very day that the vaccine was announced, 3 days after the Dove crop circle, we have this crop circle here. Isn't that looking interesting? So this crop circle again shows up in the UK. Now, can you see it has these 8 pillars around here? 8 pillars. And this crop circle on the outside has these outer extended blobs, okay, with no pip in the middle. In other words, no monolith in the middle. Now, in the center, there are 3 pillars on the circumference, and 3 slightly bigger ones, and 3 more big ones. So we've got 3, 3, and 3. Now, the 8 around it, if you put the 8 into each of the 3, what do you get? 8 plus 8 plus 8, which is 24. If you take the 24 and you put that into each of the 8 pillars here, you get a total of 192, which is the same number of days that the monoliths ran for, the first phase. Now, here's a lady with a PhD, and she claims that she demonstrates that the 8 amino acids are identical to the part of the human. So the coronavirus uses 8 of these sodium channels, or I thought they were protein spikes, but it uses the 8 to attach itself to the human. That's how this clever virus works. But what does this crop circle to us mean, other than the numerical combinations? Well, when you do some value combining here, we see this number here comes up quite a lot. 3, the 8, the 24, 103. If you match that to the Bible, there we get, this will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. And that first line there, Proverbs 3 verse 8, is key, because this is God's answer to the coronavirus. Now, here are some physical sizes. I have measured the sizes of this crop circle, and if in cubits, we get 144,000 squared cubits. Look at that, very interesting. And we get 72,000 cubic cubits, which is the 8 blobs, and that refers to he delivers the needy, precious is thy blood. So man and judgment. So we got the 8s here, some interesting combinations. We get up to the 24, the 192, the 64. Okay, so if you measure the distance between this crop circle and the headquarters, biotech headquarters in Germany, the New York Pfizer headquarters, we get some interesting Hebrew words, which is disease, plague, and death, and destroyer, and calamity, and exhaustion, and death. To Moderna in Cambridge, USA, illness, and pit of destruction, and plague, and failure. And then we got NIAID, USA, mourning, disaster, mercy, compassion, faith. And to Oxford in the UK, sick person, help, wonder, and miracle. Look at that, miracle. Then we got in India, this institute in India, we got plague and bereavement and destruction. Then in Wuhan, her death, mourning. To Belgium, Johnson & Johnson in Belgium, help and support, healing, basket of salvation, answer. Then Germany, we got hope, eradication. Then Indonesia, biofirma in Indonesia, salvation, redemption, deliverance. Then we got South Korea, SK Bioscience, healing and restoration and vitality and spirit, healing and kindness and mercy. To the European Medicines Agency, So what is the theme? We got a theme here of sickness, disease, and death, and it being overcome. Overcome, okay? 24 threes is 72. Psalm 72, 14, another number, both numbers in our equation here. Precious is thy blood in his sight. See, we are precious to God. We are the sons of gods, and he will not sit by and let us all die. Now, we see the 8 here, how it lines up to many monoliths and how they were presented. So we have here this crop circle. Let's put him away. Now, when you measure the bearing and the distance between crop circles, you also get a theme. And also I have measured distances between the crop circle and all the monoliths. And they also have a theme going on. And just to demonstrate, look at the distance between these two key crop circles here. This is the day that God lifts up his magic wand. And this is the day that we receive his miracle, 3 days later. And the distance between the two, 55 kilometers, 5 and 5. I mean, 5 God's grace and 5 Jesus' grace. I will make an everlasting covenant, you see. He who has clean hands and a pure heart. And the reverse bearing angle is 1 to 1, which is the Hebrew number for the word scroll. Okay, so let's look at some distances here between the Dove crop circle and the Utah monolith. We've got distances between Dove crop circle and the Corona crop circle. And again, they make some interesting words. To delight, my Father, living, an implied transition from man back to God, 238. 7846, the Dove crop circle to the first monolith in Utah. He gave their crops to the grasshoppers, look at that, to ruin and destroy. So the interpretation, destruction is prophesied. In Isaiah, there's a declaration of healing. So verse 7,846 verse in the Bible is Isaiah 61:1, where it declares healing, liberty, and recovery. Further down the timeline here, when we come out to about the 21st of July, so it's almost halfway between the miracle and the start of the monoliths, we have this crop circle, and it looks very innocent. Doesn't look like much, just a big circle. When you have a look up close, we see that it has a monolith in the middle, and on the outside you can see how it's overlapping. It's like it's a roll. It's something rolled up. What could a rolled up thing be? If you take that diameter, which is 192 feet. So when we measure in diameter in feet and radius in feet and diameter in inches, cubits and radius and meters and cubits and the circumference in feet and meters and circumference in cubits and the area in square feet, the area in square meters, square cubits. Okay, we list out all these numbers. We've got 192, 96, 112, 29, 57, 184. Keep in your mind these numbers, and we look at the next page to all the alignments and see what it aligns up with. And by his wounds we were healed. The cords of death entangled me, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. Rejoice and blossom. The disaster has passed. The paralyzed man stood up and walked home. The blind receive sight. The lepers are cleansed. The dead are raised. He healed them. By his wounds you were healed. Forgiveness of our sins. So it's a numeric scroll of God's healing timeline. Okay, if you conclude this, it was a divine geometric scroll. That's what it is. Of healing covenant. His warning of judgment and the witnesses of the monoliths that followed. So the monoliths were like 666 wisdom witnesses. Okay, so here we have, let's put that one over there. Let's put that down. Now we have, if we go back, just 3 days after the vaccine, 3 days after the vaccine, we have this one here. And what's it about? Well, this one seems to be about the divine government being established, divine order, Jesus' mission, God's people, God declaring that he'll pour out his spirit, healing and deliverance, and the 24 elders that sit with Jesus while he cracks these seals. So what's it about? The order has come, judgment is prepared, and the throne is descending. Let's put that one down there. So to continue in our timeline, we have another one here, and this one is to do with wisdom and understanding. We have 3 cubes. We have 2 layers overlapped around a hexagonal shape. Okay, so what's it demonstrating? And the diameter is 42. So 42 appears twice in this measurement here. So what is it to do with? The 3 cubes of Trinity and wisdom. 666 is wisdom. Here are some numbers and their meaning to do with wisdom, healing, and foreign invaders come to judge. Okay, so let's park that one down here. Now over here on the 8th of August, another one shows up. Look at this one. He's a spiky looking thing. What is this all about? 3 rings, 24 triangles in it, totaling up to 72. 72 triangles. And they are 3-sided each, which means that there's 216 sides. 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. 63 is another number that's come up in my study before. Go away and watch video number 1. In Revelation 6:6, which is the distance between this crop circle and the dove crop circle, is 66 kilometers. Do you see that? In Revelation 6:6 describes a famine. So we have from disease to understanding the mission and redemption. So let's park that one down there, a little bit over there. Now this one, also very interesting. Here we see 4 rings, 1, 2, 3, 4. And around the 4th ring, there's a bit of paperwork. And we have 8 dots. Now that paperwork is referring to the scroll, the 7-sealed scroll in the book of Revelations that Jesus is cracking. And this is what's causing all of us to suffer from the scroll of judgment. The scroll is now in the earthly realm. 4th ring represents the earthly realm. And here we have 8 dots. Now there are 7 seals. So 8 is like the rapture, the aftercoming, us rising from a pandemic. However, if you look at this one from a day perspective, this one is exactly 62 days. Like 2025, this year, we are entering 62, which is God's number of judgment. Some interesting measurements here, which line up a meaning of witness and the cry from earth and the voice to all nations, and God's scroll and the origin like his 10 commandments. This location sums up to 170. 170 is the wall that God separated plus 26. So you could say God plus the wall of separation between us and death and disease. So let's place that one down there. Now there's one more. If we go back a little bit here, this one here, okay. To be honest, I've not done a complete study on this one, but I included it because here we see the 7 rings. So around here we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 rings, which echoes the 7 seals in the scroll, which is causing us all to suffer. This one, day 0, is like the signal disruptor. The signal's been breached. Okay, there's a divine signal from God coming from heaven. Okay, now the number 7 also comes up here, and I included it in this little just to capture and explain what 7 has to do with the human DNA and this whole completion story. Now there are 7 minor groove contacts where the proteins dock, and that is a distance along the strand of 10.5 base pairs per turn. Okay, now at 10.5 you get this number 34. So there's another crop circle which appears exactly to the day, 12 years, which is 4,380 days in the past, behind this very day of 28th of May, we get this crop circle. Now, some people have spotted and pointed out that it represents, if you section angular around this full circle, you get 3.1415 9, I think it is. This is pi. So what does pi have to do with this story? Well, this is exactly 12 years, which is like a 12-year warning. Now pi has to do with this story because the human DNA turns, okay? It does these base pair, and it turns. And if it didn't follow pi, the human DNA wouldn't end up back in the same position. So you would break the structure of the human DNA based on that. So pi has to represent the human DNA structure. That's the way I see it. Now 4,380 days is 12 years exactly. Now the 4,380 verse in the Bible is this one, 2 Chronicles 20 verse 9. And there it says, or plague or famine and distress, and you will hear and save us. You may say, well, back then it was good to have a warning for something we didn't know was going to come. But anyway, this was in 2008, 12-year warning. Healing and affliction in Psalm 34. So it's a countdown from life's structure, miraculous healing of the earth. So that one is down there. Okay, let's go back to 2020. Now let's take a look at this one here. Here we have a sudden day where there's just nothing. So I got suspicious about this and I thought to myself, it doesn't look right. I wonder why on this day, the 17th, there's just nothing. No monoliths placed. All of a sudden it goes quiet. It doesn't look right. So when I investigated, I found that it happens to be day 29. Now day 29 has this representation from the book of Genesis where Jacob waits and serves for seven years for Rachel. Jacob had this 7 year of silence. So he was silenced for that period of time. Now here's just a little list of the numbers and what they basically mean. Just to recap. So we got 8, which is a number of the covenant, new creation, and we also got it the virus binds through this ACE2 8 amino acids. Okay, so go through this in your own time. Okay, now the next thing I found is that if you look at the date sequence that the monoliths came out in other words, September 2020 was the first, so there was 1 listed, there were 2 listed in October, 3 listed in November, 3 listed in December, 2 listed in January. Now if you go through that, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 1. I noticed that 1, 2, 1 is scroll. So then I had another look at this, and what I found is that this number here is the decimal equivalent of the number 8162. The 8,162 verse in the Bible is this one, Romans 7:24, and it says, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Interesting. And 8162 might also represent Matthew 8:1 verse 6. That covers the story of a man being healed with leprosy. He had leprosy and he went to Jesus and asked him, are you willing? And Jesus said, I am, be clean. And immediately he was cleansed and healed. So I also found some combinations here where the numbers matched some Hebrew letters. So what is the final message? God wonderfully designed and healed by his will. So we were made by God's hand and healed by his will. If you measure the number of days between the midpoint of the first wave in 2020 and the midpoint in the second wave of 2024, you'll find that it is exactly 1,211 days. 1211 is an interesting number because Psalm 121 verse 1, it says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come from? The heavens. Psalm 1212 is, your help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heaven and the earth. Now let's take a quick look at some individual monoliths because I found some of them very interesting. Here on Christmas Day we have looks like a cake with 8 slices. So what's interesting on Christmas Day to receive this, because before Jesus came along we had Passover, and when they ate their celebration meal with Passover, we ate it with bitter herbs to remind us of the bitterness of the past oppressors that we were put under. And God's instruction to eat bitter herbs is to remind us of this bitterness. And it changed when we now celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, and we change from Passover to Christmas. We change to a sweet food. We sweeten our meat now with sweet stuff. We don't put bitter stuff anymore. So I just thought that's kind of interesting. So there's also a bearing angle of 106 to this cave, a cake stalagmite, using a weighing of 266 tons. So it's an interesting study, this particular monolith. If we consider the 8 slices as a gospel pattern, we have temptation, obedience, wrestling, calling, searching, speaking, misunderstood, and burden. Scroll. 37th day that this, and Genesis 37, Joseph's rejection and hidden destiny. So it teaches them the decrees of the 8 slices of cake. Here we have a monolith right next to one of these waterfalls, which is a bearing of 108 degrees. 108 degrees from Pumapunku, where Jesus is standing holding the scroll. Now this monolith has 4 translations, one in Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian, and they're ancient languages too. These are not modern. But anyway, I've translated it for you, and this is what it says. Children of my Father, arise to the living water. Rejoice, people of the earth. Let the waters wash you. On the day of doubled waters, Wednesday, before the flow, O Mother of waters, the little ones of the Father, be cleansed. May the strength of the Lord be with you. Now that, I believe, is the very words of Jesus Christ in 2020. And there is a reference here with the height of he must increase, but I must decrease. So after a long study, this monolith declares the victory of the Lamb over plague, rebellion, and death. And this one is particularly the plague. If we measure the distance between this guy here standing there holding the scroll with 7 seals, if you have not seen my video number 1, you need to go and watch that. But this is Jesus holding the scroll with the 7 seals. Okay. Now if you measure the distance between him and nearby in this waterfall, which is close by, you get some very interesting numbers. You can see he's just a bit south. That means the co-latitude angle is just a little bit increased from 106 Jesus. That spot there is exactly 106, and this one's 108. So it's like Jesus plus 2. So we got Christ exalted over worldly waters. Just to sum up an explanation here, you can see of these calculations here is the North Pole orientation, South Pole orientation. So in other words, what is the angle between the North and South polar axis in the Earth and this location of this monolith? So what do we have? We have redemption and mercy. That's this monolith's theme. Now if we take the scroll holder and we match it up with this crop circle that showed up in Germany, we also get some very interesting numbers. And the reverse bearing angle of 222 degrees and 42. So Jesus is holding the scroll, and here is the scroll, 62 days timeline of God giving mercy to man. The scroll is handed to the Lamb. Look at that. There is a direct measurement here, 5,864. So Revelation 5:8 to 6:4 is the whole story where Jesus takes the scroll and the 4 horsemen begin to ride. So what's it to do with seals, plague, and death? So to conclude, this measurement here, we may say it's a warning from God. It lies exactly 42 degrees from the place where Jesus stands. And it's the rise of the beast and the plague of the coronavirus is part of the final seals. This is the final seals that's causing us all to suffer. So healing awaits those who understand the message and return to the Lamb. Here is a monolith that shows up in Nevada, and it's got these tags and this Eye of Horus. And the first guy who came along to actually document this found that it had been vandalized, and he believes that there was a Raspberry Pi controlling the door mechanism to open and turn on a little light. So I think that's quite cute. And it had these tags saying Human Day, 4th. Now the 4th of May is exactly 21 days before 25th. 21, like the number 7 and the number 14, these are very holy numbers for God. Okay, so Human Day, the 4th of May, we'll take a look at that in a moment. But here we have these coordinates. Now these coordinates are actually very close by. They're actually about 50 odd kilometers close by. And it's a bit weird. It's like this monolith didn't want to get put in that position, so it stood a little bit separate. Try to figure out why. On this day there is a waxing moon, and we have some distances to the tag, and when we sum up these distances and try to figure out what's going on, we have this theme here of, again, mercy, disease, plague, freedom from affliction, symbol of salvation, healing, restoration, judgment. Here we have the number of day differences. 53 days to the full moon. By his wounds we were healed. So the message of this monolith, I would say, you were wounded, but you began to heal. This is a testimony of those who endured. The number of days between the 4th of May, that mercy day, the day God gives man mercy, and the 5th of May is the official declaration of the end of the pandemic, which just so happens to be exactly 1,096 days from Mercy Day. In other words, this Mercy Day is the day up in heaven God declares that he will show man mercy. 21 days later, God lifts up his magic wand. 3 days later, we receive the miracle. So the 4th of May to this day, 1096, let's take a look at that number. It's to do with rebellion, sin, and disease. The 1096th verse is this one, story of Joram, but it's to do with being a healing witness. This monolith here has this 14 like star burst, and what it is, it's an immunity burst. MEC is referring to CCL28, which is a real immune molecule with 14 amino acids. So this monolith is like saying a declaration of healing and protection through true immunity, not just vaccines. This is an immunity burst, curing us, healing us. Here we have a monolith in Australia with a whole bunch of numbers on it, and it explains, it says, help us escape. And it's also got some locations on it. There's 4 of them. Okay, these are the 4 locations around the world. Now we have, if you calculate the centroid position of these 4 locations, at first I did it 3-wise because I thought it was 3, and it actually gives you the same position. But if you calculate the centroid location, you'll find that in the center is where this monolith is standing. Now, help us escape. What does that mean? Well, we're trying to escape this judgment from the scroll. The scroll is this terrible thing we're all suffering from, and we need escape. Now, here we have another one. It's called, this earlier on, it's one of the earliest ones. We have a Not Banksy. Now, it's fantastic for me to find a reference to Banksy on a monolith. Okay. Because these monoliths didn't stick around. They flashed in and flashed out. Now, to find a not Banksy piece of artwork on a monolith is like finding a Banksy piece of art on the moon. Nobody is going to be able to claim they did it unless they can show you how they got to the moon and did it. Okay, so this place here, this Glastonbury Tor, okay, it has some sort of claim here that something to do with King Arthur. And you know, King Arthur, don't quote me on this, but it's got some inclination that King Arthur was the Messiah from God, not Jesus. And this paparazzi rat, okay, the first time he was seen was exactly 6,000 days before this paparazzi rat shows up on this monolith. So I thought that's very interesting because 6,000 days marks the full return of Son of Man. And instead of the Messiah, they get this paparazzi rat, and he's changed direction. See how he's turned around. Now we have the Russian monolith. Now this one in Russia was announced by the media in Russia 2 days before they changed their statement. Okay. Now the reason for this is because, as I said in my other video, Putin is marked with the number of the beast, 107. And that's because he works for Satan. Now, Satan doesn't want you to know about God. He's trying to make you forget about God. He's trying to move you away from God. So as soon as Putin found out about this monolith, they changed the story. 2 days after the media showed this monolith, there was this scientific company close by that made this announcement saying they are making these metal things and they have this new technology that can make it pop up all over the world. Wow. Well, if Putin's got this technology, why doesn't he just put a nuclear bomb into something that can pop up in the middle of Kiev? Why doesn't he do that? No, because it's all a lie. Okay? Don't listen to the liars. Now, what's very interesting is that the name of this company that lied 2 days later is this branding on top of the monolith. And if you study the position and location and numbers of this monolith, it's all to do with a countdown to cleansing. It has something to do with deceit and lying and cheating. The final message here would be, so it's mislabeled. It's a testifier for the louder than engraving. It's a signal of deliverance. Okay, day 17, the emerging through the veil of the Institute of Pride. Okay, fear and righteousness and freedom and proclamation and help and obedience. Okay, that's the truth of this. Now, unfortunately, this was the first and last monolith in Russia. Now, I think Russia had more. We got 4 missing. And I'm very suspicious that some of those 4 are in Russia. But the thing is, if the media put any of these on Facebook or YouTube, they would be arrested by the police in Russia and shot against the wall. Okay? That's what Putin does to people. Now, here we have this one in Turkey. Now, this one in Turkey, the military didn't know what to do. They started protecting the thing. Okay? Some of them, police took it down and whatever. Anyway, this one has this reference of the moon that marks the miracle. So the moon phase was in this waning gibbous phase at the time, 76%. So the vaccines began rolling out the world, so the healing begins, and the signal that mercy is rising again. It's what you may align it to. There is a match here of 112 days. And we've seen this number before in the study, 112. So the sickness will not end in death. It is for God's glory. It's a reference to that. So look up. Mercy is rising. The healing has begun. In 2024, these 3 monoliths, to the 22nd of February, we've got exactly 3 years. It calculates to 3 times 365, exactly 1095 days, which is 3 times 365, 3 years. Then we have 1,000 days after the first wave of 192 is this day, 22nd of February. So the scroll is sealed, returning to God, and judgment, witness of healing, mercy. So we have witness to mercy to peace. So the days between the monoliths and God's timing, it reveals God's mercy, transformation, and the Trinity surrounding earth and protecting us, looking after us. God's gifts. So leave it 1 more year. Mercy extended. Look at that. So we got these numbers here, 36, 17, and 6. This is the total perimeter in cubits. We've got 36 million. So 36, 17, and 6 would mean labor through to victory into healing. So that is the distance between these three monoliths. So it's declaring healing. Now this one here, I just happen to have a welding license. And when I look at this welding here, it doesn't make sense, because if you're going to tack on this sheet steel to this panel here, you can see that it's arc welded here. This appears to be CO2 welding. Unless there's something from behind, I don't know. But just as an experiment, I thought to myself, well, if one of these pips is 10 and a little one is a 1, in other words, double digit, single digit, let's count it. We got 10, 1, 20, 1, 2, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we have these numbers here, 10, 1, 20, 1, 2, blah, 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 blah. And when you convert the string into hexadecimal and ASCII, you get this series of numbers: secret, mystery, learn, start, write, hello, code. Look at that. So whatever you study with these monoliths, it all has this theme, common theme of a sign from God and a mysterious miracle. Now, thankfully, somebody actually uploaded a high resolution image of this monolith. So we can see here it has some marks on it, some writing or something. So what I've done, if I go into Photoshop and I reduce the brightness and increase the blackness, so we can kind of see more detail. Let's try to pull more detail out of this image. When we do that, I get this. And on the left panel, you can see like there's an explosion from something at the top, and down it beams, like it bursts. It's beaming something down. You see that? And on the right panel, you can see this triangular, like a UFO, beaming something down to the ground. And up here on the right hand corner, do you see it looks like an eagle flying towards you? He has its beak, its two eyes, its mouth, and its wings. It's like an eagle flying towards you. Do you see that? Very interesting. And here, this squiggly, all this writing here, it's obviously a language we don't understand. Now, a guy in Colombia is driving home from work, and it's slightly raining, and he sees this funny thing in the sky. So he pulls his car over, grabs his cheap 3G camera phone, and takes this snap. Boom. And he may have actually witnessed one of these monoliths being placed or being taken away. So to explain some phase 1 of the timeline and the foundation of the scroll, in the beginning we have this Mercy Day. Mercy Day, this is the date that God up in heaven declares mercy on man. Okay, 21 days later, we have the 25th of May. So there are some interesting calculations I put together here to represent what it means. And it's all to do with change and Christ years and a cry for deliverance and 6 days of creation and God's word, and the plague conquered, and the 7 pattern tripled, the priestly order begins. We have a scroll and a seal is opened. Here we still look at the first wave, and we see how there's a midpoint, a day 1, a day 96, and a day 192. Now look at how the last monolith from the first wave ends up the exact same date that the vaccine was announced and man receives God's miracles. It's exactly 1 year later. Do you see that? So here we have some interesting totals. If you total the sum of all the bearings from the monoliths to the first temple, King Solomon's temple, you get about 14,000. So this could refer to the assembly of the redeemed. The sum of all the bearings to the Pons Pontiff, or the scroll holder, Jesus, is 28,800. So 28 days, like a lunar lockdown. The reverse bearing sum from the monoliths to King Solomon's temple, the reverse bearing, may be rounded to 42,000. So the 42 months of tribulation. the 42 day of test. Then we have to true north, the co-latitude angles 14,000 and the south pole angles 12,000. Look how they all sum up to that. Absolutely incredible. Then there's the final gap, the apex, which is the first fruit, 100-fold blessing, and Jesus' number or mercy. So here I've summed up the numbers again, tried to give you some explanation on what it all means. So the key takeaways here is God redeems and sealed. Okay, the monolith bearings. Then we have the global testing and echoes of Jonah's call for repentance. Then we have the mercy and the blessing and the first fruit. And then we have the turning point, 5th of May, the scroll apex, or the pandemic emergency, both lifted. So the divine scroll. Here we have the healing triangle in 2024. Just to sum it all up for you, the co-latitude, the DNA repair, the crop circle collaboration, we have the corona defeat insights, the mRNA boosters, the Omicron's milder surge. So divine sign of miracle, making the virus undoing as a conventional sign of divine restoration. Here is just a quick review of the astronomical events that happened at the same time. All this was happening, we had it was more than just a full moon. There was several events which I don't want to go into too detail, because the only way to solve those mysteries properly is to solve those mysteries up in space. But you can see how there was an alignment. There is an alignment like this 3 days later, where Venus begins its return in 2008. So that pi crop circle in 2008 and Venus starting its return in a 12-year cycle, I think that's quite interesting. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. Now, one thing that's important. Do you know how many countries there are in the world? There's two groups of people. Some people will say 195, and some people will tell you 197. Now, if you meet them halfway, you get 196. Isn't that an interesting number? Very biblical number, 196. There are 58 countries I found that did not receive a monolith. Now, those 58 countries do have one thing in common. All their governments do not respect the Christian church. In other words, they're not Christian countries. And God only looks after his people. Although the world was cured of coronavirus, only Christian countries and Christian places received one of God's monoliths. Isn't that interesting?